Praise God. I want to share with you what I got from reading the book of Ruth. But I want to start out with this in Matthew 11:28-30. Everybody is familiar with this, but it relates to Ruth and Naomi. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And the reason why I start out with that here in the book of Ruth, and I wanted to focus more on Naomi. Not only is she going to be a widow who's childless, but she's old. I can relate to that. I can relate to being old and being in a situation where what's happening? You're kind of trapped and you don't see a way out. And I want to point out that in spite of everything that Naomi went through, God found a way for her. And it's a rest, that he found a way for her to rest. Oh, that's the title of my message. God's rest is our security. We're not going to find safety or security in this world. There's so much violence and fear and just people putting themselves ahead of anybody else. Yes. And we lose that love that gives us that security here. I want to say how Naomi came to a different land. She and her husband and 2 sons, they left Bethlehem because there was a famine. And they went to another foreign land, Moab. And then right there, her husband died. And then, even though her 2 sons got married, they died later. So she's left with 2 daughter-in-laws. And she realized that she doesn't have security. She doesn't have a resting place. Oh, yeah, I look up here, where is that? Manuka, I think is how you pronounce it. Hebrew for a resting dwelling place. And it's spelled M-E-N-U-A-C-H, I believe it's U-N at the end. And we got to realize in the days of, it says, actually, it starts out in verse 1, this was in the days when the judges were in operation over the tribes of Israel. They were working. And this is a time, it's a pre-industrial society. Farming was the only really way to keep alive. I mean, herding and doing hunting and gathering and stuff like that. So there's not much room for people if their family is gone. And that's what happened to Naomi. They're left at the mercy of other people. So when Naomi heard that God was blessing Bethlehem again, that the crops were coming in, she realized that now, without her family, her husband and 2 sons, I emphasize this because really both men and women needed each other to have a family, a family that will take care of the old. And that's where survival comes into play. Now, when Naomi made the decision of going back, her 2 daughter-in-laws wanted to go with her. And that impressed me right away. She must have been a very caring character, a character, she loved her. And she, in this whole process, Ruth, who was a woman of Moab, found her true identity by identifying with Naomi. I mean, she was so impressed by Naomi that she was willing to leave everything, her own home, her own family, and the gods. Well, I think she was very impressed by Naomi worshiping the God of Israel. And she found that this God of Israel was a true God, a living God, because of the character and strength of Naomi. But what I want to tell you in verse 13, at the very last sentence at the end, Naomi said that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. She felt forsaken, abandoned by the very God that she worshiped. And yet she didn't stop worshiping and walking with God. There's such a thing as when you get really depressed and bitter, when you get upset with God, God will not forsake you. I want to make the point that God was still with Naomi, but Naomi felt like God has deserted her, abandoned her. But now she realized that if she's going to make it in life, she has to go back to Bethlehem, to her people. And that turned out to be the turning point, because Ruth clung to Naomi. She didn't want to leave her. And without realizing it, that's where God was intervening. Naomi thought God was not there for her, kind of turned against her. But then, because of the love in her heart that God put in her, that it brought a stranger, an outsider, to come with her. And through Ruth, the Moabite woman, God was going to establish a new family for Naomi. He was going to show that he would find a resting place for Naomi. That's what impressed me. This loving kindness that God had was being manifested. And I gotta tell you though, once Naomi got to Bethlehem and the women there recognized her and she said to the women that, don't call me Naomi, but call me Mara, bitter. Yeah. And she told them how she left full, having a family, a husband and sons, and now she comes empty without her husband or her sons. But God, through a way, you know how if we're in a tight situation, it seems like nothing's going right. We got to realize that might be the way that of an opportunity for God to be glorified in that situation where we thought there isn't a way to solve this or to get it fixed. And like I say, when we think there's no way, God will find a way for us. Right. But we have to walk in faith, continue to day by day trust Him. Oh, I wanted to share with you this. The book of Ruth, in the Jewish liturgy, in their reading on calendar, they read it out loud on the day of Pentecost. I found that fascinating because it's the Feast of Weeks, and that's the first harvest, the spring harvest of wheat and barley. And this is when Naomi and Ruth gets to Bethlehem, that's what's going on. It's the beginning of the wheat and barley harvesting. So, and because of that, and under the covenant of God with Israel, people who don't have farmlands or orchards or gardens even, they can go out during the harvest time and glean. You know what gleaning is, right? It's going out in the fields or going out in the orchards and picking the leftovers or the stuff that's been left behind in the corners. And that's God's provision for the poor, for the widows, and for people who just don't have enough food. Right. So, and guess where Ruth shows up? She goes into the next of kin, a relative of Naomi, Boaz. And he turns out to be a man of integrity, and he is impressed with how Ruth is there with Naomi. So he must have, I'm thinking, it's a small town, Bethlehem, and you know how people like to gossip and talk to one another and share what news they got. So people must have been impressed about Ruth being there with Naomi, her mother-in-law, to take care of her, to do what needs to be done. And so that really got to Boaz. He was impressed by that. And so I think he was more impressed by Ruth's character, because it was kind of like that faithfulness, that love that she had for her mother-in-law. He honored it. He respected it. So he instructs, his men to leave a little bit more, make sure she's okay with the young women, and that nobody molests her or disturb her or stuff like that. And sure enough, when she gets back to Naomi, Naomi, so she is impressed by how much grain or how much barley she got from the field. And once she realized it was Boaz, she tells Ruth, don't go to anybody else's field. Continue there, because he is our Redeemer. He is our next to kin. The Hebrew word for that is Goel, G-O-E, there's a little comma up, and then there's E-L. Anyway, that's a person that's supposed to restore, repair, take care, and redeem the property that's not in use when somebody passed away. And apparently, Naomi's husband did have property in land, but it was no longer in use. It's not vacant, or you know how it is, like there's a apartment or a building that is not being in use, it's not occupied. So he is in a position of taking care of that. And so in chapter 3, verse 1, Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, Ruth, my daughter, shall I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you or with thee? Okay. She thought, okay, I don't have any way of securing your future. But then finding out that God had moved Ruth right into an area where she could help her daughter-in-law to find a husband, to find security. Okay, she realized, Naomi, you know, she's an old woman, but she's being watched and cared for by a younger woman. And for that, Naomi wants to make sure that she gets the opportunity of finding a new place in Bethlehem, accepted as one of them, and be married. I want to go to Isaiah 56. And this is an encouragement for people during this time of the Old Testament. This is in Isaiah chapter 56. I want to read from 3 to verse 8. Neither let the son of the stranger that has joined himself to the Lord speak, saying, the Lord has utterly separated me from his people. Neither let the eunuch say, behold, I am a dry tree. For thus says the Lord unto the eunuchs that keep my Sabbath, and choose the things that please me, and take hold of my covenant. Even unto thee will I give in my house and within my walls a place and a name better than sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off. Also the sons of the stranger that joined themselves to the Lord, to serve him and to love the name of the Lord, to be his servants, every one that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it and taking hold of my covenant. Even them will I bring to my holy mountain, make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices shall be accepted upon my altar, for my house shall be called a house of prayer for all people. The Lord God which gathereth outcasts of Israel saith, Yet will I gather others to him besides those that are gathered unto him. So it's not just the outcasts of Israel, but it's the strangers, the people who are outside of Israel that God is gathering and bringing to him. And how is this done? This is done through the love and care that people have for one another. It's not so much the law as the living life, I guess, character, the actual love that these two women had for one another. And I'm so impressed by it that Naomi now wants to make sure that Ruth has the opportunity to marry Boaz, because at the end of harvest she instructs Ruth how to go and approach him and ask for him to cover her with his skirt, just like God. I think it's in Ezekiel chapter 16 verse 8, God cast his skirt over Israel to be bounded by them like a husband to his wife. It's a love story, but it's a love story that also includes Naomi, okay? Because as a man of integrity, he realized that he was not the nearest relative for Naomi. And God, in chapter 4, he intervenes again, because Boaz called in so-and-so, and he have him before the 10 elders. And at first, so-and-so was willing to purchase the land, but when he was told that he would marry Ruth, the daughter-in-law of Naomi, no. You'll recognize the fact that his name is not mentioned in the chapter 4. It is Boaz. His name is now written down, and it's remembered for doing what he did. He takes on the responsibility of not only purchasing the land and making good of it, but also marrying Ruth, the daughter-in-law. And let me get back to Ruth. You know, when you read the book of Judges, right towards the last, I think 5 chapters, it gets so ugly that I thank God that the book of Ruth is right in between Judges and 1 Samuel. You need something to lift your spirit up, because coming to the end of the book of Judges, it really depressed me. and so when you're reading Ruth, it's a crisis that gets resolved. It's God glorifying himself in a situation that seemed almost hopeless, and yet it worked out. And I want to, let's see, yes, chapter 4, from 13 up to about 17 of Ruth, book of Ruth. So Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife. And when he went unto her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bare a son. And the women of Bethlehem, they said to Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, which has not left thee this day without a kinsman, that his name may be famous in Israel. And he shall be unto thee a restorer of thy life, a nurturer of thy old age. For thy daughter-in-law, who loves thee, who is better for thee than 7 sons that are born him. And Naomi took the babe, lay her in her bosom, and became a nurse unto it. And the women, her neighbors, gave it a name, saying, There is a son, a grandson, born to Naomi. And they called his name Obed, for he is the father of Jesse and the father of David. You know, and God worked it out. Naomi is now safe in her old age. And more than that, she has a new family. She has a family that replaced the one that died on her. And she can live in peace, knowing that she is loved and that she has people to love as well. So that she really had a safe resting place. And God used her to bring Ruth into this family, of bringing her into Israel. And so she was blessed, because really you could say that she is just as much an ancestor to King David and to Jesus as much as Ruth is as well. Because the love between these two women is more like a mother and daughter, a real close kinship. And I want to make the point that when we feel like we're deserted or abandoned, it's not so. God is still with us. He's always with us. But we live in a world that's constantly getting people in trouble. And maybe in those situations, God can use it to give glory to Him and bless us in a different, unexpected way than we thought. And that's what I want to encourage you all, and be edified that it pays to love and take care of others around you. And I think we should thank God that He has that loving kindness for us, that He's not going to forsake us and leave us behind, but He'll be glorified if we just keep walking and knowing. See, we walk by faith, not by sight, as Paul had written. And that's true. I mean, don't get discouraged, or don't let it take you down. Just easier said than done. But that's why we need each other, right, brothers and sisters, to pray for one another, to share the hurts. It says, weep with those that weep, as well as laugh with those who laugh. So that is so with God. He weeps when we are sad, and He makes us happy again and gives us joy. That's all I got to share. Bless you all.